Shay Locomotive, serial number 1643, fondly known as Ole Four Spot, is currently undergoing renovations in the original Shay maintenance shed at the Heritage Museum on U.S. Highway 2 in Libby, Montana. It is the museum's most prized exhibit. It served as a workhorse for the Libby Lumber Company and later the J. Neal's Lumber Company for logging operations in and around Libby, Montana in the early 1900s. This is a powerful standard gauge Class B 37-2 gear-driven Shay locomotive, commonly referred to as a sidewinder or stem winder because of the odd arrangement of gears and a drive shaft running the full length of the right side of the locomotive, making all wheels drivers. Manufactured by the Lima Locomotive Works in 1906 at Lima, Ohio, as one of a special class of 4 locomotives, serial numbers 1642 through 1645, built for the Thompson-Greer Construction Company. They had a 2,000-gallon water tank instead of the standard 1,560-gallon and had a fuel capacity of 4 tons instead of the standard 2 tons. With a build date of March 7, 1906, all were shipped to Buell, Minnesota. Locomotive number 1643 was designated Thompson-Greer engine number 11 and now is the only survivor of their class. The other 3 have been scrapped. Thompson-Greer Construction leased the Shay to the Rainy Creek Lumber Company for logging operations near the Minnesota-Canadian border for a time. Delivered by common carrier and hauled across a frozen lake on a logging sleigh to the company logging railroad. There it hauled logs from the forest to water until 1909, when purchased by the Libby Lumber Company of Libby, Montana, and shipped there by rail. The Libby Lumber Company designated her engine number 4. Originally, locomotive 1643 was fueled with wood. Later, Libby Lumber Company converted her to coal and, around 1927, to oil. The speed of the train with this locomotive was approximately 12 miles per hour on good track. Operations on spurs in the woods might involve grades from flat to over 11%. On the steep grades, this locomotive was designed to push 2 empty steel logging cars uphill at a speed of about 6 miles per hour. About every 3 hours, the locomotive would take on water by siphoning from a stream on logging spurs or from a water tank located on the main line or at the mill. Water from creeks and streams were plentiful, and only rarely were additional water tenders added to Montana logging trains. At Libby, number 4 hauled logs, supplies, and crews until about 1924 over rough, uneven, steep logging lines southeast of Libby with an efficient operating range of about 15 miles. Later, rails were laid some 12 miles to the northwest over J. Neal's Railroad logging bridge across the Kootenai River to access valuable forest reserves owned or operated by the company. The abandoned J. Neal's Railroad logging bridge was destroyed by U.S. Army engineers during World War II as a training exercise. The current bridge over the Kootenai River, known as the Old Hall Road, is now a walking bridge connecting trails on both sides of the river. Between 1925 and 1931, it operated on the Great Northern Main Line north of Libby along the Kootenai River for about 12 miles. And after 1931 was primarily used to haul logging crews and equipment to logging camps and to perform switching operations in the woods. Around 1930, Ole Four Spot's proudest moment was hauling 2 boxcar loads of live elk from the Great Northern Main Line across the Kootenai River Bridge to Rifle Range Draw in the Kootenai National Forest. These were the first elk planted in our region by Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Logging camps were set up in the woods. In some camps, the families of the men lived there as well. There was a schoolhouse at every camp with children. Note the flagpole on the school building. The wives would often ride the train in the morning to town to get groceries and supplies and return to camp later in the day. In 1936, railroad logging gave way to logging by trucks. Ole Four Spot was primarily used for switching cars in the mill and to the local Great Northern Main Line about a half a mile. This continued until about 1944, when it was replaced by a larger locomotive, J. Neal's No. 5, brought here from Klickitat, Washington, now operating at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. No. 4 continued intermittent switching until retired from operations in 1946 for an active service life of about 39 years. Ole Four Spot was then left to molder in the mill yard until about 1963, when new mill owners, St. Regis Lumber Company, decided to give her a cosmetic facelift and put her on display outside their Libby office. In July of 1987, Champion International owned the mill and gave the Four Spot to the Heritage Museum, paying for the move. It was moved by truck to the museum grounds within a half a mile of her former place of labor as a switch engine at the end of the line. The Heritage Museum property was once a part of the same J. Neal's Lumber Company. It was later discovered that Champion had not completed the transfer papers, so in 2012, the final mill owner, International Paper, sold the Shay to the Heritage Museum for $1. Earlier, in December 2011, Four Spot was moved into the original Shay maintenance shed, where it was disassembled and work was started on rebuilding. The firebox was first. A grant allowed it to be almost completed. All of the wheels have been turned, waiting to be put back on the trucks. Are you a railroad enthusiast or a railroad history buff who would like to help with the efforts to restore Ole Four Spot? We welcome volunteers and donations of money, experience, materials, advice, and bequests towards returning her to active service. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and accordingly, donations are generally tax deductible. Your kind donations will help us continue to preserve, protect, and restore our Shay. For more information about volunteering or donating towards restoration of the Shay locomotive and tell us how you may help, see the email address on the screen.